Okay, so thanks for the invitation then. So basically the content is the same than the one I presented at the first conference in Montreal, but depending on the time we have, we obviously go for more. So, and I'm obviously very glad to present again this work in this SIG. So the aim of the work we have done was to look at the Sysdiagnose feature of iPhones. It's a feature that exists on any Apple device, and see how much we can use it for forensic purpose. In a sense, that's what we have tried to do. So everything started with an issue we have. So and I will just explain after where I work, and that make sense. The question was, how can we analyze and validate the integrity of a device? And in our case, mostly iPhones, since we do provide as corporate device iPhones, without jailbreaking it, which is a bit the issue with many commercial solutions, is that they first exploit the device if you want to access other type of data than the user data. So that was basically how it started. And then we figured out that there is this thing called Sysdiagnose that was built by Apple initially to do remote or on-shop debugging and support for their customers, but also used by developers when they develop applications for iOS. And what Sysdiagnose actually provide is many information and overview of what is happening on the device in terms of running processes, memory allocation, file system logs, and so on and so forth. So typically that sounds like something that would be interesting to look at, not that really documented, and especially from a forensic angle. There were a few previous work that we will mention at the end, but not so much. And all of that started 2019, actually before Pegasus even. So the work I will just present was done by the three of us. So the first two are unfortunately not in this call. So Emilien Legentel, who is from CTI, leading the DevSecOps team. Aaron Kaplan, who is working with me so actually in my team. And myself, who I'm in charge now of the awareness and threat intelligence for the European Commission. So it's a kind of a sister team from CTI, except that the team I work in is the internal CERT of the European Commission. So we are part of CTI constituency, but just to give an idea, the Commission is by far the biggest EU institution with about 50,000 end users. So it's the biggest by far, like 10 times bigger than any other. So we have our own capacity and work hand in hand with CTI. We are even co-located in the same building in Brussels, and have offices in Luxembourg as well. So obviously this also explains why we are super sensitive about user data and capturing and limiting what we capture to the bare minimum, and why this was actually something we were really looking at from a forensic angle. So what we cover in this presentation is a problem statement, then have a look at what Apple Sysdiagnose really is, what we have tried to develop. We'll do some demo where we have tried to mimic as much as possible real cases, and then discuss a bit the future of what we envision to do with this work. But as I said, we started like 3 years ago. Everything is open source, that I can say. We have released the code just before giving the presentation at Montreal. So we will be free to use and reuse all the things I will show in this presentation. So obviously, so as I said, it started before Pegasus, but back then we already had the feeling that some bad stuff might happen on Apple device. And usually, and it's actually one of the issues that exists with MBT, is that the normal way, or the mostly documented way and supported way of doing iPhone forensic is starting from backups and copy of the user data, which for us is a no-go. We should limit looking at user data to the bare minimum, at least in the mandate we have. And when you want to start doing full device forensic and have a look at what is operating at the operating system level, then basically you need to jailbreak. And for us, that was a bit of an issue because we consider that jailbreaking, we lose the trust in the device. You never have certitude on what is really happening to the device and how much trust you can have in third party or solution you found on the internet until you fully reverse them. But then it's a task you can't do. When we look at the amnesty report, it was quite interesting because one of the way they mentioned back then was actually to use Sysdiagnose. So in a way that was kind of a confirmation that the approach makes sense. We didn't add any before. So we were quite happy when we saw the report. And then they also come with the MVT, and we do a quick comparison between the two, which is actually a different approach for doing forensic of mobile device. So in our view, actually both approaches are probably good to have in a tool set if you want to do mobile forensic and mobile investigation. So as I said, it started before Pegasus. We have strict policy that forbid or at least strongly limit the access to personal user data, and we do the same for any type of device. So as soon as it contains user data, then we are bound to really strict regulation on what we can capture, in which context, and how. So not something you can really extend. And it's why we found that actually using Sysdiagnose was a really nice approach because it's, in theory, only technical data. Can a bit discuss this again, but that's a bit the idea. We are also willing to have a generic approach, so the tool does not contain any IOC, it's just basic parsing and making the life of the analyst easier. And as I said, we want to use the jailbreaking option as the last resort option. When really we think that we should go deeper, then we can go to tools that actually exploit the device to do a full dump of the device. And then you have another view again, but that's our last resort option. We also ask ourselves a question, which I think is quite important, is how much using this approach will be forensically sound? And actually the answer is probably not, or not completely. The issue there, but potentially it's also an issue with the solution we can discuss, is it relies on binary that are run at the operating system level himself. So if you do have a Mac, you can do a man Sysdiagnose, and it will reply. So you have a binary on a Mac that is called Sysdiagnose and do the exact same thing. Which means that if you do have malicious binary on the device that do have root privileges, potentially the output of what you get with Sysdiagnose might have been altered. It's a view, not necessarily the best view you can have, but again, you don't need to do any kind of jailbreaking or whatever to have access. So it's kind of a trade-off. On the other side, if we look at solutions like the one that exists with the Grey key or Celebrite, they do rely on exploits to access the device. And then I guess the same question can be asked: how much can you still believe in what you get from a tool that starts by jailbreaking a device? So somewhere, I guess there are pros and cons in both approach, and we feel that in the context of incident response, which is obviously completely different than law enforcement, it's okay if you know at least the limit of your tools. So that's a bit the decision we did, and again, it's really on you to, based on the use case and your assumption, to decide to use one approach versus another. If you look at MVT, as I said, the approach is a bit different. So first of all, they do support both Android and iOS. We only rely on Sysdiagnose, which means we only cover Apple device. And we actually have tested this mostly on iPhones and iPads. We start looking a bit on the watch and Apple TV, but it's mostly a work in progress. So consider it only work on mobile Apple device. MVT mostly relies on backups, which does include a lot of user data, but less of the operating system data, which obviously then for us was an issue because we don't want to look at user data, even though for certain cases it's what you need to go after. Like Operation Triangle, one of the first IOC mentioned by Kaspersky is have a look at the database of attachment of iMessage that you would not have in a Sysdiagnose file. On the other side, it's easier to sell to management and senior management that you are using technical data than user backups, at least in our point of view with the rule we have. They have several modules as we have. They can ingest 6 IOC. So far, we did not really build on that, even though it can be included. And I will show you that in a demo. And we actually kind of try to mimic the volatility approach or have a framework, heavily extensible and as flexible as possible. and I will explain you that in soon. So now, if we look at, I don't know if there was any questions so far, or if it makes sense, or if you completely disagree, feel free as well. That would be an interesting feedback from our point of view. So, in case there is any question, feel free to stop me.
Also, feel free to raise your hand, also to signal if you have questions.
Perfect. So, if you look at what is Apple Sysdiagnose, that's actually the man page I mentioned. So, I cannot do a man on an iPhone, but I can on the Mac. It's what you get, so it's said many information, mostly technical information. It's quite clear, I guess, from this man page. So you can see kernel extension, the application that are consuming most of the resource, what is happening at the network level, a spin dump, file system usage, network statistics, and so on and so forth. Many actually info that you don't really need from a forensic point of view, like what's the health of your battery, even though for criminal investigation, I already have heard it might be useful. But at least for us, not less. So some hardware health and all that kind of info, but again, all of that is in an archive. So the way you generate on a mobile, that's quite tricky, by the way. You need to press, at least on current device, the volume button and the side button for about 3 seconds. The issue is if you press for too long, then you lock the device, so it's a bit annoying. Then you have to wait about 10 minutes, I would say. It's the time it takes to generate the archive. And then if you go to the settings, privacy, analytics, improvement, then you will show this file called Sysdiagnose_the date. It's a TGZ file that you can then retrieve. Apple quite extensively document how to generate them, so it should not be such an issue to find out. You have similar procedure for iPads. Just as a side note, if you want to do the same on an Apple TV, you have also some combination of key you can press, and if you want to do the same on a watch, you need to send the profile to the watch via the iPhone, but again, it's feasible. Then if you want to retrieve, there are many ways of retrieving it, including doing a backup. But one of the easiest way we found is to basically use AirDrop, and then you just AirDrop it or send it as an attachment to via some app, and then you retrieve the archive. Some forensic tools also support retrieving the file, so we just mentioned a few there. And you can also use Libre mobile device if you want. So I have a small insect. So now the interesting part is in terms of content. So you have the output, usually text output of a few commands that are run on the device, and that will show what are the running processes, mounted partitions, and so on. They are copying what they consider key preference file, which are the plist file for those that are familiar with macOS. Network configuration history, that's actually quite interesting if you want to see a bit to which network the device was connected. The information vary also a bit depending on user settings. Information on hardware health, many log file, which is probably for us the most valuable source of information, device diagnostic, usage overview, and so on. So it's quite extensive, but again, as you can see, not that much on user-specific data. Even though you will see in the network configuration that it's actually quite precise on where the user is or was. And one of the demo I will show you is we just change a bit the GPS coordinate, otherwise that would be my house and even my office space in the house. So it was really precise. Now, if we look, and it's also why one of the reasons we went for building something around it. The Sysdiagnose actually contain many different formats of files, ranging from simple flat text file, CSV, compressed archive, SQLite database, Unicode file, that's not a big deal, and then plist. Plist can be in 2 formats on an Apple device, and they nicely mix those Cocoa epoch with the Unix epoch. So there is quite a huge amount of work to uniform all the timestamp and dates to have something that makes sense. That's a quick show of what the content of an archive look like. So you see many directories and files, as mentioned, that mostly are concentrated in a few locations. So you have the .logs that actually contain the logs. It's quite obvious. And there also you have the power logs that is actually super powerful. It's contain probably one of the best of machines I mentioned. So you have the full log there, and you will see it's interesting. Then you have preference. It's all the playlist I mentioned mostly. Summarize. There they kind of already extract or produce reports out of the raw info they gather, and it also includes an extract from power logs, but you have the full copy in logs. You have the system.log.archive, which are the system logs. Wi-Fi does not contain only Wi-Fi, but actually all the network and Bluetooth information, and then many hardware information on top of it. So if we look, I don't know how much time I have, but what I can do is just
you have
slide.
30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes.
Sorry?
30.
Okay, thank you. So I will maybe just remain on the screenshot there and spend more time for discussion, except if...
Actually, David, I'm thinking if you want to overrun a little bit, since it's recorded, people can always watch the rest later.
Oh, yeah, but anyway, that was the... so the aim of those is mostly to show what the raw content look like. So the first one in the front of the screen, it's the log archive displayed by the standard tool on macOS. It's actually very hard to parse elsewhere than on a Mac device. On the Mac, it's quite straight, where you have a command called log, show, which is easy, and nicely output a JSON file. Second one is another type, which typically there is SQLite database. And the third one, that's a plist, also nicely displayed when you use Xcode on a Mac. But if you do that manually, you will see. I guess the aim of this is just to show that an analyst would a bit struggle with different type of artifacts, many tools to use, and nothing which is very uniform. Which actually has the challenge we do have captured there is that while you can analyze many files with standard tool, so typically CSV, plist, so are quite easy to handle. You have a lot of Python library for that as well. Some are not, like the power logs. You have this issue that the information is really spread on many files. And if you want to do manual analysis, it's quite tedious, and you need to have some knowledge of this and these internals, which again is quite a challenge for an analyst. So with that in mind, we look at how we could build a tool to help, and it's actually where we spent time developing something. So as I said, it's open source. If you want to have a look, you can go to GitHub and you will find the repo there. It's released under the Open Union Public License, which is quite open. So you should not have any issue to use it, extend it, or propose changes. And we mostly welcome any contribution to it. So we really hope that from the first conference and other people will start giving feedback, results, issues they may have, and then to be able to extend it further. That's really what we would like to do now with this tool. So as I said, the philosophy was keeping every block as simple as possible and as generic as possible. So we see that it's many small pieces or small modules that each can be run independently. So basically we will run an analyzer and parser. I will explain a bit in detail what it means. Each of them can be used as standalone tools. And in some cases, like the PS1, for instance, can even, when used standalone, generate other type of output that the one we use in the context of this framework. Some of them are also coming from other open source projects, and that we have extended to include them in this framework. There are also clearly references coming from there when it happened. So the idea is that a parser take as an input an artifact and then generate a JSON output. And then analyzer, they will rely on the JSON that are produced by the different parser and then create an analysis in a relevant output. So format vary depending on the needs. Typical example of it is we do have a timeliner now that will, from all the artifacts that contains relevant timestamp, will generate a time sketch JSON head file that you can ingest into time sketch and can search, and that we will demo. So the way it works in terms of processing is we ingest the TGZ. We have a first phase in which that we call the initialization, in which we produce a case file with relevant file and a version of iOS and so on. Then we start with the parsing step. You can parse only one artifact, or you can parse all of them if you want. Obviously, the more you parse, the more it takes time. But if you want to really focus on certain artifact, you can. Each parser will generate a dedicated JSON file, and when you run the analyzer, you can again run one or all, depending on what you want. Those analyzers will rely on the available JSON. And if I take the example of a timeliner, it means that if you typically, let's say, you only want to parse network artifact, you can just run the parser you want and then produce a timeline that will only contain the timestamp extracted from the artifact you are interested into it. So you, for instance, can exclude having a timeline that will include the power logs or the log archive. That is completely feasible. So today, what we do have on the repository is 25 parser plus a demo one, and 5 for analyzer plus a demo one. The two important ones today are the timeliner, because then you can directly start searching into time sketch that we found super valuable. And from time sketch, you can then also start ingesting IOC and so. So that would be a way to nicely include IOC there. And then we have two flavors of a Wi-Fi geolocation analyzer. And we are working on application UID 1. So the idea there is to track the application name or the UID, the behavior of applications with different artifacts. The way it works, so as I said, we have the analyze to extract the archive and produce a per case JSON that we feed to case JSON. Parsing call selected or whole parser you want. It produces data to parse data, so I guess it's quite self-explanatory. And then we have analyze that basically do the analysis. And that I will actually show you because maybe it's more interesting than the whole part of Apple. So what I will do in the quick demo is I will not do the initialize. I already have many already extracted. But I will show you basically how it looks for the parse and analyze step. And then I can show you. Let's see if, yep, it's there. Yep, now I need to stop sharing and share this now. Window, yep, share. So in a few seconds, you should be able to see my terminal. Can you just confirm you can see it?
Yep.
I see there is a question I may try to answer.
Can you read the question for the recording, please?
So, do you get any visual cues that the process has started? So no, that's the issue. You just get a small vibration to confirm that it started. And on some device, typically on the iPad, there is no confirmation at all. So that's well, that's a bit the tricky part. On that, we are exploring the option. I don't know if it will work or not. It's just something we are currently exploring is, could we trigger the Sysdiagnose via a domain, and especially profiles that we could push via the MDM, for instance. On that one, I don't know if it will work or not. What I know for sure is that Apple can generate the Sysdiagnose remotely. They cannot upload it, but they can trigger the execution. But we are investigating how we could do the same. And our idea, our hope, even though we don't have any confirmation that it will work, so I'm just shooting an idea, is that since it's feasible, at least on the watch, to do force the execution of Sysdiagnose via profile, we feel that we might have the same option on the device. Something I also forget to mention is that you can actually change the content of a Sysdiagnose quite heavily by playing with user profile. Device profile, I see user profile, sorry, device profile. So if you send a specific device profile, you can enable more looking than the default one. And we feel that it might be an option to have another meaning. The question remains on how then to get them back, and on that we don't have an answer yet. So still a lot to do, I guess, on automating this for large-scale Sysdiagnose. So far it was, so I would say, limited. And of how much, that's indeed a valid point, is that the log retention is, so question was any perspective on how often the Sysdiagnose archive typically should be generated collected, considering that log retention vary between 8 to 30 days, which is completely true. It can be even less in some cases. We don't. The issue we run there is that we mostly generate a Sysdiagnose file when we feel something wrong might have happened, or when we feel that a certain user works that we have a look at this device. And if you want to have something automated and repeatable, then we need to find a way to first generate automatically the Sysdiagnose, which today, as far as documented, is a manual process, and then how to retrieve it. And on those 2 points, I don't have a final answer, unfortunately. It's something we would like to add. So if someone has an ID, I would love to get IDs there, or paths you can explore. So that's the latest GitHub version of what we have. So as I said, we do have. Is it big enough? I guess this. So if you see each one has its own main page, but with this edge. So that's the initialize. Basically, what it takes is simply Sysdiagnose file as an input, and I will regenerate. And we have this fourth option just to say that even though we do already have ingested the Sysdiagnose, we can force to reingest and regenerate the file. Typically, that's super useful if you add some extra parser or parsing some new file, and then the JSON might not be fully up to date, and you can force re-ingesting a Sysdiagnose and regenerating the JSON file. The part which for me started to be interesting, the parsing part. Sorry. So again, we have the same ID. So we have a few commands there: list, parse, and all parser. So the list will show the case you have and the parser that are available. So if I just list cases, you can see I have 4 ingested. The first one is actually the one we use for mini demo, where we do have an app install out of the normal way of installing an app, so not via the App Store. Then I have my corporate device. We have a case where it's the device connected to a raw Wi-Fi, and then you have a test file on an iPad Air that was jailbroken, and where you have an SSH running on it. Then you can also list the parser that are available. Maybe it's a bit. Oops. Okay, on my screen, I have some overlay that are super annoying. Okay. So those are the parser that we have. So we have basic one, like just the output of the PS commands, but then we have some that are a bit more interesting, like parsing the log archive, parsing the power logs, looking at different PLIS files, and so on and so forth. So those are the parser we have. And then typically, if you want, let's say, I will take this one. So if I want to do a parsing, what I just need to do is parse, choose my parser. So let's take PS. And then the case ID I want, so we'll take the first one. And it output the result as a JSON file. I can show you. So that's the kind of the output we produce. If you want to have a look, just for the sake of the demo, to what the original version looked like, if you go to data case store, so that's actually my Sysdiagnose file, the raw file, and then we have the ps.txt there, which is the original format, which is quite a common PS output. And just to give an idea, the juicy one there was this, where we do have a reverse shell running on it. So that was the stake of the demo. So that's how it works. And then if you want to do now the analysis step, we have the same. It's exactly the same principle. We can also list the case we have and the analyzer. So if I do list the analyzer here, I have 2 installed on this machine, only 1, sorry, I don't know why. I don't have the latest version, so good demo. So in this case, I won't be able to do more than just a timeline, but anyway, that's the same thing. So you can run all analyzer, and then you just provide the case number, or I just do analyze, and then I give a case ID. I just pick one randomly. Sorry, it's better if I do provide analyze, and then my analyzer. Okay, I know it will run for quite a long time. There are always a few output because they come from inconsistencies in some logs. So we were so far never able to have 100% extraction without issues. So we have to drop from time to time a line or something. So that's also something on which we're trying to improve. So this will take quite a long time now because that one was fully parsed. So it will take about an hour to run. So I will switch back to the slide in the meantime. If you want to reproduce, you can just, if you do have an iPhone, take your iPhone, generate a Sysdiagnose, and you will be able to do the exact same thing without any issue. So you should be able to see the slide again. Can you just let me know when it's the case?
So can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just to rebound on what you just said. You said it would take an hour. Is it just the average? So I guess the question is, I guess depending on how much application or things you have on your iPhone, I guess the parsing and analyze will take longer, or just an average, you should expect that it will take a long time.
No, if you want everything, it takes on average an hour. The issue is not the number of apps, it's the amount of logs that are stored in the power log and in the log archive. It's really detailed. And I guess it's also why it only keep 8 to 30 days, because it's quite big. The final timeline we get, so the fully compressed Sysdiagnose is about 200 meg. But the timeline, which is uncompressed, so it's not comparable, but we end up with timeline that are about 2 to 3 gig timeline. So it's quite big JSON file. And then timescale took a bit of time also to ingest everything.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. So if you want to make your own parser, we have tried to keep things as simple as possible. So the idea is that every parser has a minimum, and we provide the skeleton for one as a description that is just showing in the L file. And then we have an input, which is actually a key to a file that is generated at the initialize step. So the idea is that Wi-Fi security corresponds to an exact path for a specific Sysdiagnose file. So it just it's avoid to have any path encoded directly in the parser, because things do change a lot. It's also an issue with Sysdiagnose from one version to another. Some artifacts appear, others disappear, content change, and And each parser also have as an option argument in the function called parser that is linked to parser call. So in this case, get Wi-Fi security log, for instance. And I can show an example of a parser if there is an interest. Can take as an option an iOS version as an integer. So we do have some parser, if you look at the code, that do support, for instance, iOS 13. And then you have another version of the same function for other version of iOS, simply to accommodate with the fact that the content has changed from one version to another. Another just have disappeared. So that's also the challenge of this, is that you need to keep up and include the version. We have tested all of this on iOS 16, 15 quite well as well, and 13. So we have a gap with 14. We did not really, we kind of skip one version there. And we need, I guess, soon to check on iOS 17. It's coming. The analyzer, it uses the same ID. So we have a description, which is simply a text to display the file. Then the function to call. There is no need to mention which file to ingest, because the idea is that it will ingest whatever is available from the parser. But then it can also specify which format you will use as an output. So this, for instance, is the description from TimeSketch. It will call the function generate timeline when you run analyze this analyzer, and it produces a JSON-L, which is the format that is expected by TimeSketch if you want to ingest a timeline. Potentially, it also means that if you use the main function of this analyzer, you may produce a timeline in a different format. It's typically what we have, for instance, with the PS parser. That can also generate graph-based visualization of the process, which is actually not that interesting. It tends to be very flat, but we have it if you found it interesting. So I will show you two demos we have produced to try to mimic as much as possible real things, but it's completely homemade, so it's not real cases, but also to show a bit of what's the kind of output you can get. So we have recorded them, so which I guess make things a bit easier and at least more repeatable. So let's take the first one. Yep, I will explain first. So the first demo we do is we take the example of rogue Wi-Fi. So since we have prepared the demo for the first conference, the rogue Wi-Fi was called FirstCon Wi-Fi. But you will see that we localize the Wi-Fi at a strange location. So I'm actually leaving my real place 200 meters away from the NATO military headquarters called Shape in Belgium. So it's a military place. So normally FirstCon Wi-Fi has nothing to do there. So this was a screenshot. The kind of the scenario we have made is the user realized that something is wrong. I guess from the screenshot you can quite quickly also spot why it's wrong. And the device connects automatically to a Wi-Fi in-house, which is called in this case FirstCon Wi-Fi, but at a place which it doesn't make any sense. So if we know, so we do obviously all the steps beforehand. So we generate a Sysdiagnose, run the analyzer, and then let me share the right screen now. Run the analyzer, so the parser and then the analyzer. And in this case, we generate a KML1. So let me show you this. So that's now the output of the KML ingested in Google Tools. So it offers a nice visualization. And in this case, the geolocalization was enabled on the phone. So are you able to see the video, just in case?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay.
Yeah, works.
So in this case, we just zoom on where we have the phone. We just slightly edit the position of my home, so I'm close to there, but not really there. But anyway, that's a detail. So there, it's selected the place, and then if you start traveling a bit with the phone, suddenly we spot that the device, the test device, connected to a FirstCon Wi-Fi that has nothing to do there, So this actually is the middle of the military base next to my home called Shape. You even have a bunker that is supposed to where the mouse is. It's a bunker supposed to resist a nuclear attack. And this is the military command of NATO force in Europe. So obviously your Wi-Fi is not supposed to be there. So the aim there is just to show what you can retrieve from Wi-Fi playlist and history, and just for the fun, since it was first and fast in Montreal, the first thing we spot is the Canadian post office in front of the shape. So small visualization, but I guess already show the value of quick investigation of all the places users have been. And I guess just from that, it's kind of obvious that something was wrong. Another demo we have done, which I hope is potentially a bit better or more interesting. Yep. So that one will be the case of a hot application. So I hope you can see the slide again. So the idea there is we were willing to have a super malicious application. So it's not malicious since we were not willing to have our developer account kicked out by Apple. But the idea is we just pick a demo app from Apple, compile and install with a developer certificate on the device to kind of mimic. I know it's not 100% real, but to kind of mimic the behavior of an app that would have been installed out of the App Store. So we don't have App Store logs, but we will have logs of the application running on the device, which basically was what we were willing to have. In this case, obviously, the application is visible on the device. So you have this food truck application, that's the one. There was a screenshot from the food truck one. And just for the fun, that mobile I'm using is MDM enabled. So it's a test device that is in the MDM. So nothing triggered there. They were kind of okay with that. So the demo we were willing to show in this case is now we want to have a bit of the activity of the app when it was installed and so on. So let me share the small video we have prepared. Yes. So again, the idea there is you should be able to see the video now. So we have taken a Sysdiagnose, parse all the artifacts, run timeliner, analyzer, and ingested into TimeSketch, which in this case was running on AWS because it needed a lot of memory. So for those that don't know, TimeSketch is a tool that was developed by Barian quite a long time ago. Because I remember Johan developing it during the first Vienna conference, so it's rather old. And now it's working for Google, and the tool is available open source, so it's quite evolved nicely. So definitely a tool we like. So this is the timeline we have produced, and this looks like the output. So we just searched for the food truck application. We did not do any fancy stuff, and then you can see the amount of logs. We have more than 1,000 events, but you have also clear timestamp, and you also give a good idea of when the application was actually pushed to the device. So this is the kind of output you can have. And if you see on the left side, is where you can also, from the TimeSketch, easily start adding Sigma rules, Yara rules, and so on. So that might be also where, or at least in our view, that's where we want to have the link between using IOC and the framework we have developed. So you can also clearly see our.c.apple sample code.foodtruck. That's a let's say malicious app. Not really a malicious app, but that's the idea. So it's the kind of output you can generate. And one of the few we found actually quite interesting because it's I forget if in the video we can see how many events we had initially before searching. Does it say it's no? I should check, but it's really huge. No, I should have checked before. But yeah, you have typically billions of events at the end. No, we have a quick third use case on which we didn't do any video, but it was just to try to show yet another perspective on it. It's the one I actually show you with the iPad. So this one was on iOS 15 because we do have explosion jailbreak on iOS 15. The ID there, and we have done the same. So the value of redoing a demo there was quite low, but it was just to show that just from a PS, for instance, that you don't see anything from the device screen, but in the background, since I had a root access to the device, I was able to run processes that you would not expect in the device. So typically in this case, you have the SSH, and again, if you do run Sysdiagnose, parse analyze, you would be able to spot SSH running when it was running, and so on and so forth. So that's just a bit the same idea of something happening on the device that is not expected, but you can see from the Sysdiagnose point of view. Again, as long as nothing manipulates the output, which obviously is one clear limitation of this approach, because if you run PS and you have a malicious binary that intercepts or edit the result of PS or check for execution of Sysdiagnose, then you may not rely on the output and the results. So now challenges we have identified with all this. So the first one is, as I said, artifacts tend to change heavily from one version to another. So we need to actually adapt to this. Documentation already by default from Apple is not super good or super detailed. That's already the case for the APIs when you want to develop. But this is actually an undocumented feature, so it's you need to struggle a bit and try to make sense of what you have, and then you need to deal with all those different format and data encoding types, and then try also to find your way through what is relevant and what is not. And most probably there are things we can add or we should add, and we are welcoming IDs. So in terms of limitations, it is a diagnostic feature by design, so it's not made for forensic purpose. You can sell it as it does not contain user data, but I guess from the first demo I did, it can be discussed. It's a bit the same when you say that the memory dump does not contain user data, but it's a technical things. I guess we all know that it does contain a lot of user data as well. It's a bit less true for Sysdiagnose, but still it does contain sensitive data. If we look at, so when I need to check with the latest report, but at the time of preparing the slides, the IOC that were released by Kaspersky from Operation Triangle were not available in the Sysdiagnose. So I don't know if you can detect or if you can't. So on that I don't have any answer. But what is sure is that the initial artifact published by Kaspersky about Operation Triangle only relies on things that exist in the full device backup. Like the SSNet attachment, some preferences that were not, that are not in the Sysdiagnose file, which means that we don't know, if we take this particular example, if that would work or not, to be clear. So I think it's a clear limitation. And I guess then point to the fact that when you use that, you need to be aware that there are clear differences between the content of Sysdiagnose, which is a view of the operating system, kind of a view, so it's, I would say, a small window to what is happening at operating system level, and that you don't have in a backup, versus what you do have in a backup, which mostly are the user data. And it's why we consider it's more a complementary approach than a real alternative or something. So I would say don't bash MVT, it's just another tool. So the future, we are planning to extend the coverage to future iOS version, maybe previous one if there is a need. We are willing to investigate how this can be extended to other type of device. So I'm not sure the TV and the watch, it's funny, but maybe not necessarily super useful for incident response. macOS might be interesting in some cases, because again, that would allow kind of quick overview of what is running on the device. We are willing to add more analyzer based on the needs, but we need to also have clear idea of what are the needs and where we should invest more time. And one of the things we are working on is validate the effectiveness in real case. And there clearly, if you can have feedback from users that are willing to share even in TLP, had some Sysdiagnose, or at least result that they got from the tool or thing they have missed, that would be super valuable for us, and I guess for all the community. And again, we are really insisting on that, but we made the tool available open source. So all the code I show you is open source. So the idea is that people are really free to adapt, change, edit, comment, criticize to make this useful for all. On that, as I said, we are also looking forward for feedback, and then come with something that everyone can use and make really something useful out of it.
Thank you, David.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I said thank you.
Okay. So we just also reference the people that somehow not initiate, but give the idea of people from who we start with their work. So Sarah Edwards, who is a stance instructor, actually pointing one that Sysdiagnose exists, but she had no clue if it can be used. So it was one of the triggers for this. So I guess we need to thank her for the, not necessarily the idea, but the reference to it. There was a work from the also stance instructor, by the way, Mattia, Heather, and so this GitHub handle Cheeky Forensics Monkey. They have started a work 2018-2019 called iOS Sysdiagnose Forensic Script, still available on GitHub as well. You will see that we not say stole, but we fork some of their tools and extend them, and then push them back as well, obviously. Those were actually the first parser we have included. We have many more. They were mostly looking at user artifact, so they had a different approach. But they also have done a bit of work on this. Johan, obviously, for TimeSketch, and he also helped us to figure out how timestamp works. We struggled a bit on that. And then Amnesty National Pegasus report was also super useful to validate certain things. Again, it's open source, so we are repeating that many times, but we really want people to have a look. And that's it for me. So I don't know if there are any other question I can help